Greetings. This video I'm going to teach you some basic Linux commands. These will also work on a Unix system, although the Unix and Linux commands might be a little different in terms of how they behave and their options and things like that. But I'm assuming that you already know how to get connected to a Linux machine, and so here I am in CS class, or class-1 is the machine name. And when you get your account, you're going to have an empty home directory. Okay, and the home directory is kind of like your top-level folder on your PC or your Linux machine. Now, folders are what you see in a graphical user interface, but on the command line we typically talk about directories. But directories and folders are exactly the same thing. And the first command we're going to learn is how to determine our present working directory. And so that command is pwd. And you can see that there is a directory called home, and then within that directory there's a directory called maloof-m, and typically your home directory is the same name as your username on that machine. Now it turns out that there's online help. You can get online help. You can certainly Google and find information about Unix commands using your browser and the World Wide Web. But there's a command called man, which is short for manual, and then you can give it a command and it will tell you about the command, a description, and then these are options that you can use with the command. And then you just scroll through, and then when you're finished scrolling, you can hit Q to quit, and that takes you back to the command line. Another useful command for getting help on a Unix machine is called Apropos. And this searches man pages for keywords. So for example, you would type in anything, but if I say apropos directory, this gives you a list of all the commands or all of the man pages of the commands that say something about directory. We should be able to find pwd. So apropos is a good way to find commands that pertain to a particular topic, such as directory or a compiler, files, and then once you get the name of the command, then man or the manual pages are great for helping you learn how to use that command. So how do we look at the files in a directory? So we do that using ls. If you look here in the output, you see that ls lists the directory contents. So now if I type ls, you can see that I have an empty directory. And we'll talk about different ways of creating files. One thing you can do is use the touch command. Touch will create an empty file. So now if I type ls, I should see this new file in my directory. There are many options for ls. It's an incredibly complicated command, very powerful. I'm not going to go through all the options, but one important option is -l, which gives you a long listing. And so you can see here, here's my empty file. With the long listing, it tells you when the file was last modified. This number is the size of the file, and since it's empty, the size is 0. This is the user who owns the file, and in this case it's me, and this is the group to which that user belongs, and I belong to the group users. Then these this information over here, we'll take a look at this a little bit more closely as we go through the tutorial. These are the mode bits of the file. And in this particular case, this tells me that the user can read and write to this particular file. And again, we'll go through these mode bits in more detail as we go through the tutorial. If you need to change the mode bits, there is a command called chmod or change mode that will let you change the bits. So for example, if I wanted to make this file read only, I could say for the user, remove the write permission from empty file. And now if I look at, you'll see that the W is gone, and now I've created a read-only file. And then to restore the write permission, I can add W to the user privileges for empty file. And now I can modify. And again, these permissions for files and directories can be complicated, and it's just a little outside the scope of this basic tutorial. Well, what if I want to change the name of my file? There is no rename command, but there is a command called move, or MV. So if I want to change my empty file to some other file like file.txt, I can use move. And now you can see that I have file.txt. If I want to create new directories, there is a command called make directory, or mkdir. Say for example, I want to organize my homeworks into directories or folders. So for my first homework, I create homework 1. Now if I do an ls, you can see that I have a file and then I have a directory, homework 1. I know that it's a directory. Notice the D next to that file name, which tells me that that's a directory. And this new permission X means execute. That means that if there is an executable file like a command inside homework 1, I can execute it. Now if I want to descend into that directory, I use CD or change directory. And now if I look at my present working directory, you can see that I've descended into the directory homework 1. And if I look at the files, it's an empty directory. It turns out that there are hidden files, which we can see using -f, which gives me a full listing. And so you can see here that I have 2 files. One is dot and the other is dot. First of all, in a Unix and Linux system, any file that starts with the dot is a hidden file. That's why we did not see these files when we did a normal listing of the directory. Full lets me see the hidden files. A single dot is the name of the current directory. 2 dots is the name of the parent directory. And we can use these in commands. I can also create my own hidden file. I simply create a file name where the first character is the dot. So now if I touch hidden and I look at my directory, it seems empty. But if I do a full listing, you can see that file there. So that's just an illustration. Now let's say that I want to remove a file. And to do that, I use rm, and I want to remove the file hidden. If I do a full listing, you can see that the file hidden is no longer there. So I mentioned that dot is the parent directory, and I can use that to move up in the directory structure. Here I am in homework 1 directory. If I say cd dot, then it moves me up in the directory structure 1 level. I can also use move to change the name of a directory. So if I want to change the directory homework 1 to homework 2, I can also use the move command, and now you can see that I have changed it to homework 2. To remove a directory, you use rmdir homework 2, and now that directory is gone. Let's say that I want to work on homework 1. To do this, I need an editor. There are 3 primary editors that you can use on a Unix system. The simplest is called Nano. That's what I'm going to use for this demonstration. But for real programming work, you need to use either VI, which stands for Visual Interactive, or you want to use an editor called Emacs. So let's use Apropos to see what editors are available. Oh, well, that was a little surprising. There we go. So now you can see that there are many editors on this machine. Nano is one. VI or Vim are for writing code. And then the other popular editor for writing code is Emacs. So at some point you want to learn how to use either VI or Emacs. But I'm just going to use Nano. And I want to edit my file homework1.txt. Here is my editor, and you can type just like you would in a word processor. The nice thing about Nano is you have these on-screen commands. Control O, which is what this command here is, Control O writes out or saves my file. So I'm going to save my file by hitting Control O. And you can see that it asks me a file name to write. I'm going to stick with homework1.txt, and you can see that it wrote 1 line. So now I'm going to exit by hitting Control X, and I am back to the command line. There's homework1.txt. If I do a long listing, you can see that now its file size is 22. What if I want to see the contents of homework1.txt? One command I can use is cat. And cat is one way of printing the file content to the console. If the file is really long, cat will just stream the file contents. It might be bigger than the window we're using. So you can use a pager called more. It will stop when it reaches a screen full of information. And we'll demonstrate this later on a larger file. Homework1.txt is simply too short. So perhaps a better organization, what if I have multiple files? So I'm going to recreate my directory homework1. And now I want to move my homework solution into that directory. I can use move to accomplish that. Move homework1.txt into the directory homework1. Now if I do a listing, you'll see that the text file is no longer there. I can also list the contents of a directory, and you can see that in the homework1 directory there is the file homework1.txt. I can actually edit this file from here by typing homework1/homework1.txt. That lets me edit the file in the directory. So I'm going to exit. Of course, I can also descend into the directory, and I can edit the file here. Now I'm going to exit. What if I want to remove a file? Now, if I go back to the parent directory, remember before I removed homework 2. If I try to remove homework 1, it tells me that it fails because the directory is not empty. In order to remove a directory, it must be empty. And this is just a safeguard to make sure that you don't remove something that you shouldn't. One way I can do this is I can descend into the directory. I can remove homework1.txt. Now the directory is empty. I can go back to the parent directory, and now I can remove homework1. Another useful command is history. I mistakenly typed that. The history gives you all of the commands that you've typed. One thing that you can do is search backwards in your history and execute a command. So for example, what if I want to execute, now this is a short command. It's not going to kill me to type ls again, But just to illustrate, if I want to execute that command, I can use the exclamation point or the bang, and then I can type in L. And this command will search backwards in my history and execute the first command that it matches. And in this case, it's ls. So you can see that it searches backwards, it finds the command that starts with L, and it executes it. Another thing you can do is you can look at your history and you can execute based on number. So if there's something special, let's say that there's another, if I search backwards for N, I'm going to get this. But what if I want to execute this command instead? I can do that by saying bang 2071, which is the command number. And you can see that it tried to edit homework1.homework1.txt, but I've deleted that directory. I can recreate the directory. And now if I look at my history, I can see the command I want to execute. Another thing you can do is scroll back through your history using Control P. So if I hit Control P and Control P and Control P and Control P, I get back to the command that I want to execute. And now it's successfully created this new file. Now I'm going to write this out. That's the file I want to write. And now I can exit. Another useful option for ls is capital F. Now this shows you file types. Now you can see that this is a directory because it adds the slash. If you're looking here, you can't really discern which is a file and which is a directory. In fact, we could have a file named homework1 or hw1. You would have to look at the long listing to know that hw1 is a directory. But if you use ls capital F, then you can see one is a directory and one is a file. Now what if we want to copy a directory? If I want to copy, I can use cp. So if I want to copy file.txt to new file.txt, that works. And now I have two files. Notice that they are both empty. You would imagine that I would do exactly the same thing if I want to copy a directory, homework1 to homework2. Turns out that this does not work. In order to copy directories, you need to add a -r option. -r means recursive. This is useful because maybe I want to copy the files of a directory, but not any subdirectories or subfolders. So Unix, Linux makes you specify the -r command, which means recursive, when you're copying directories. So if I copy -r homework1 homework2, now you can see that I have two directories, homework1 and homework2. Of course, the problem is in homework2 I have my file named homework1, so I need to fix that. I'm going to descend into the homework2 directory, and now I can move homework1.txt to homework2.txt. Let's go back to removing directories. You know that you can't remove a directory unless it's empty. So if I try to remove homework2, it tells me the directory is not empty. It turns out that it would be cumbersome to have to remove, if you have a very large directory structure, it would be very cumbersome to remove all of the files and all of the directories so that you could just remove the directory itself. So there's a recursive command for remove that will let you remove homework2. This is a very dangerous command because this is going to recursively remove the entire directory structure under homework2. In some cases, you'll be asked if you're sure you want to do this, but not always, depending on the version of Linux that you're using. So you need to be very careful when using this command. Also on a Linux system, when you delete a file or remove a file, they're gone. You cannot recover them. So again, be very careful when you're using the recursive option with remove. So notice that it did not prompt me, and the homework 2 directory and all of its contents are now gone. Okay, to show you how these commands work when you're dealing with a lot of files and a lot of content, I pulled over the Federalist Papers. This is a new directory which I can see using capital-F, and so now I'm going to descend into the Federalist directory, and I can look at its content. And so here are files containing the Federalist Papers. Let's say that I want to look at one of them, such as f1.txt. Notice that the content scrolled and I can't see the top of the file. So this is a good place to use more. Notice that it stops. It tells me what percentage of the file I'm looking at. I can use space to page through the document. I'm hitting space. I can use return or enter to move through the file line by line. If I hit H, it gives me help and tells me what commands I have available. Now I'm going to hit Q, and that cancels the output of the more command. If I do a long listing, you can see all the files, their contents. What if I just want to look at a portion of files? One thing you can do, and this is a very complicated topic, is you can use matching expressions on the command line. What if I just want to see the files that start with 8? Then I can use star.txt. And the star is going to match with any character including the empty character. And so notice that I'm only seeing the files that start with 8. What if I want to look at all the files that start with 8 but have a single character? I can use the question mark for that. The question mark, unlike the star, matches with only one character. The star matches with 0 or more characters. The question mark, typo. The question mark matches with one character. Notice that F8 does not appear in this output or in the file listing. You can use this to edit the files too. Now I am going to use VI for this, but let's say that I want to edit those files. I can say VI edit the files, and now I can skip through them using :n. So there's Federalist number 80, 81, 82, 83, and so on. So you can use these pattern matching capabilities of your Linux system to edit a lot of files, to list a lot of files. Another thing you can do is you can look just at the top of the file. Head only prints the first 10 lines. If you look at the manual page for head, you can see that you can specify the number of lines that you want to look at. The default is the first 10, but you could look at the first 20. Head N20 f85.txt. Now that shows me the first 20. There's also a command called tail. that shows you the end of the file. Again, you can give tail an option to see only a certain number of lines. Again, it's -n. So if I want to see just the last two, it shows me the last 2 lines, which are these two. Another useful command is grep. Grep stands for get regular expression and print. Get regular expression and print. A regular expression, again, a very complicated topic, is a language that we use for matching patterns on the command line. We can also use them in computer programs too. Let's look at some of these text files. Notice that I used star.txt. That matches with all of the text files. Notice that Madison wrote this paper. What if we want to list all of the papers that Madison wrote? We can do that using grep. So I can say grep Madison, and then I want to look in all of the text files. And you can see that these are all the files that Madison wrote, or wrote with Hamilton. Since all of the files in the directory are txt files, I can also just say grep Madison. Star is going to match with all of the files. So if I say ls star, I get all the files. What if I just want to see the files in a particular range, 50 through 57? Again, I can say grep Madison f5 .txt, and that shows me. What if I don't want to see the files that Madison wrote? Well, I guess I misspoke. Hamilton or Madison. Some of the authorship of some of the Federalist Papers is disputed. So what if I want to see the files that we know Madison wrote? If you check the man page for grep and you scroll down, you can see that -v lets me invert the sense of matching so that I select non-matching lines. So now if I grep -v Hamilton, that's not exactly what I want, because any line that doesn't contain Hamilton is going to match. So I get all of this output. So what I actually want to do is I want to find the papers that Madison might have written, and then I want to exclude Hamilton. So let's go back to command number 2143. So this gives me all of the files that match with Madison, and now I want to exclude Hamilton. And the way that I can do that is by using what's called a pipe. The vertical line is a pipe. And so it takes the output of the first command and it uses it as input to the second command. So now I can grep -v. I want to exclude all of the matches with Hamilton. And now I get a list of the papers that only Madison, or that we know that Madison wrote. Sometimes you might want to see how loaded your machine is. There's a command called Uptime, and this tells you that your machine has been up 11 days. Currently, there's only one user on the machine, and then this tells you information about the processes running on the machine. To get more information, you can use the command top. This tells you information that Uptime tells you, load averages, 1 users, but now this tells you all the processes that are running on the machine. To cancel this output, you can hit Q, and that takes you back to the command line. If you want to see who is on the machine, in this case there's only 1 user, you can use who, and that tells you that Maloof M, and then if you hit W, that also tells you who is logged onto the machine with slightly different information. And this concludes our basic tutorial on Linux. So we've learned how to create directories, remove directories, copy directories. We've learned how to copy files, edit files, remove files. And then we've looked at some basic commands for inspecting the contents of files, either by lines or by searching through the file itself. And then remember, you can always get help. Certainly you can use Google and a browser to look for documentation for commands, but you can also use Apropos and Man to get information.